All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a pretty radical document, one that proposes a complete reinvention of our financial world. It's called the Atlantic City Manifesto. So, let me ask you a question. What if everything you own, and I mean everything, your rare books, your family's land, even priceless art sitting in a museum, what if it all had the financial power of cash in the bank? But, and here's the kicker, without you ever having to sell it. This is the core, mind-bending question the manifesto starts with. The manifesto's main argument is that our current financial system, it's obsolete, a dinosaur. It's just too slow, moving at the speed of bureaucracy while trapping immense amounts of value behind these old, inefficient walls. So, this document declares like a new era is not just needed, it's inevitable. One that shifts us away from a system built on debt and promises to one built on the real, provable value we already hold. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the problem it identifies. Then, we'll unpack its very bold declaration. After that, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how this whole thing could work, understand its ultimate mission, and finally, imagine what this new world might actually look like. So, let's start with the liquidity trap, which is really all about the problem of trapped value. So what's the core issue the manifesto is trying to solve? Honestly, it's something I think many of us feel intuitively. We own stuff, we have assets, but we can't easily use their value. They're just kind of stuck. Now, this is a really interesting way to reframe things. The manifesto argues that poverty isn't about not having things, it's a technical failure. We are literally surrounded by valuable assets, but our systems just lack the tools to convert that physical value into usable economic power. So it's not a lack of wealth, it's a failure of the system itself. Okay, so in response to this so-called technical failure, the manifesto makes a pretty revolutionary declaration. It proposes a new fundamental right for all the things we own. And here it is. This is the central idea. Every single asset has an inalienable right to be liquid. Period. It proposes creating what it calls a direct injection pipeline that can connect any asset, a piece of museum art, your family's land, whatever, directly to the financial system, letting you extract its value instantly whenever you need to. All right, so let's move on to the engine of this new system. How does this go from being a cool concept to an actual process? I mean, how can value travel freely while the asset itself stays completely safe and sound? Well, the solution it proposes is this idea of a sacred separation, and is a pretty brilliant concept. The physical asset itself, what's called the sovereign anchor, is never touched. It stays completely safe. It's only its digital value, its economic spirit or bare ownership, that passes through a kind of metaphorical filter to be used financially. So the value travels, but the asset itself never has to move an inch. Okay, but this raises a huge question, right? How in the world is the true price of an asset figured out without it just becoming a mess of speculation? Because if value is just an opinion, this whole system is super fragile and wide open to manipulation. To solve this, the manifesto introduces a key new role: the curator. So the curator's job isn't to guess the value, it's to prove it. After they analyze an asset, they launch what's called an inverse auction. And in this process, the curator has to put their money where their mouth is. They commit their own capital, placing their own cash on the table to prove the value. This establishes a true price, a price that's backed by real-world risk. And this is all then audited and recorded in real time on a public ledger called the G-Ledger. So in a nutshell, this inverse auction process is what's designed to replace all that empty speculation with a verifiable commitment of capital. The price is real because someone is willing to pay it right here and right now. And of course, to build any kind of trust, the entire process has to be radically transparent. Every intention to liquefy an asset is announced publicly through a public edict of wills. It's then recorded on that public ledger, and it's even open to being challenged by anyone during a public claim period. It's this constant scrutiny that's meant to ensure only the truth can prevail, making the whole system legitimate. So, we've got this really powerful engine for unlocking value, but the manifesto is very clear that this isn't just about some clever financial engineering. It has a much more profound purpose. The whole goal is to pump lifeblood into the vital organs of our society, and it starts with our cultural heritage. I mean, can you imagine museums that never have to worry about keeping the lights on because they can actually leverage the incredible value of the art on their own walls?
It's also about making sure our centers of knowledge, our libraries, can become, and I love this phrase from the manifesto, cathedrals of solvency, instead of being charity cases just struggling to survive.
And maybe most importantly, it's about allowing families to convert their own material history into a real foundation for their economic future, all without having to sell off precious heirlooms. This is what the manifesto calls its universal purpose. Okay, let's try and bring all this together. What is the fundamental shift being proposed here? It really is a complete change in what we consider to be the foundation of money. It's a move away from a system based on faith and debt, like our current fiat currencies, which are only valuable because the government says so, and toward a system based on the proven real-world value of assets we already own. It's a fundamental shift from just belief to actual evidence. And this is the manifesto's really powerful conclusion. The goal is to transform money from this abstract concept, this ghost of debt, into a direct reflection of tangible reality, a mirror of the actual value that we, as a society, already hold. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to ponder. In a world where an object's value can be completely separated from its body, where its economic spirit can travel freely while its physical form stays put, what does it truly mean to own something anymore? The very definition of ownership might be about to change forever.